All right, this is exciting. It's the first vlogging experience with the Sony A6600. I just got it yesterday. First thing I did was went through the menu system. Oh, I hate going through the menu system. Actually, maybe that's a good idea. I'll show you guys how I set up my menu.
Careful who you cross, careful who you test. Give me your worst and you'll get my best.
Okay, car scraped off. Before we get to the camera settings, I have some meetings. I just sat on my coffee cup.
Careful, I'm a lion, don't test my pride. Standing like a mountain, looking the devil right in his eyes. Know how to back down, how to back down. No, I don't know how to back down, how to back down. No, I don't.
Okay, meetings, and then we'll be back.
One eternity later.
Okay, I might have lied a little bit. I just finished my entire day, not just the meetings. I had like an hour-and-a-half meeting and then I worked like a full 8-hour day. I was just thinking about how I'm going to actually show you guys what my settings are on the A6600, and I don't really have a way to do that here. So no more cutscenes or anything. We're just gonna hop straight back home and I'll show you guys what my settings are. For real this time. I promise it's for real. Also, I got this today. Very excited to try that out. Let me know if you have any questions about the new Rode mic for a future video. Okay, so I swear, we're going home now. We're gonna talk about my settings on the A6600. Let's do it. Okay, as promised, we're back at home. No more lollygagging. I know we're like 2 minutes into the video already, but here we go. We're gonna dive into the A6600. I'm gonna show you guys how I set it up. I only got this yesterday. I did have the chance to play with the A6600 at Sony Camera Camp before. It was awesome and one of the reasons why I knew I wanted to buy it. If you see me looking down below the camera, I'm not like getting distracted or anything. That's where my monitor is so that I can see what's going on and so that I can record the screen to then show you. So let's just dive straight in. All right, so diving into the first menu, I do actually have this set to RAW. It currently says JPEG because my camera is in video mode. So that does say JPEG, but you don't want it on JPEG. If you want to shoot RAW, you want to have RAW. I shouldn't say you don't want JPEG. You do whatever you want to do, but I don't have it on JPEG. I put it on RAW. I usually use a 3:2 aspect ratio. I do switch this over to 16:9 sometimes, only if I'm specifically shooting what's going to end up being a 16:9. It just helps me with my composition. If I'm shooting RAW for photos, I can get back the 3:2 anyway by uncropping in Lightroom because I'm using RAW files. Long exposure noise reduction, I leave off. High ISO noise reduction, I just leave on normal. On to page 2. Color space, we're gonna leave as sRGB. Lens compensation, shading and chromatic aberration default to auto, but distortion compensation actually defaults to off, so I turn that on auto. All of this stuff is stuff that you can actually change depending on what setting and stuff, so it's not really a big deal while you're in the menus. Again, more stuff, all this focus stuff is stuff that I change all the time, whether I'm in continuous autofocus or any of that kind of stuff. I'm gonna be changing that while I'm shooting, so I don't worry about it in the menu specifically. The AF illuminator, I turn off immediately. I don't want that little red flashing light all the time. AF with shutter, I leave on. I'm not a back button focus guy. Pre-AF, it defaults to off and I leave it off. This was something that I remember when I got my first Sony camera, it defaulted to on and I couldn't figure out why it was constantly focusing all the time. I wanted it to stop and only focus when I told it to focus. I'm a control freak like that. Display continuous autofocus area. This is pretty important if you want to see where it's autofocusing in continuous autofocus mode. Again, this is more stuff that I would probably set as I was shooting. I just leave the auto exposure lock with shutter set to auto. Don't worry about anything in the flash because I don't really use flash. Does this have a flash? This camera doesn't even have a flash anymore. It must be for external flash though. The heat is turning on in my apartment. White balance we're going to be changing on the fly as we're shooting, and we'll talk about picture profiles later. Shutter auto white balance lock, I leave this off. I don't use auto white balance often, but I have another thing to show you guys about auto white balance later that I really like about this camera. Focus magnifier time, I set to 5 seconds. You can set it shorter or you can set it so there's no limit. I find sometimes when I use the focus magnifier to try and help get focus when I'm in manual focus, I don't want to have to hit something to get it out because then I shake the camera. So setting it to 5 seconds means I just have to hang out for 5 seconds for it to kind of go away. And then I like the manual focus assist on. I actually flip this back and forth sometimes depending on what kind of situation I'm in. I love that I can double tap the screen to use the focus magnifier, so I don't always use the MF assist. And then as far as peaking goes, I like to set it to on, peaking level high, and the color is red for me. And then we're on to the second tab. Break for some coffee. We're crushing here. Okay, so these settings in this folder are mostly for video stuff. So we're looking at the movie exposure mode. Now it doesn't say movie exposure, but there's the little like film thing beside it to show you that it's talking about movie mode that matches the little movie symbol on the actual dial itself. So we know that we want to be in manual exposure, or personally, that's how I like to shoot. Now this file format is where I'm going to actually change if I'm going from my 4K 24 frames per second, which is what I typically shoot in. So I would change this to the 4K option, but currently because I'm outputting to record the screen, I have it set to HD 24, but this is also where I would go if I wanted to record at 60 frames per second or if I wanted to record at 120 frames per second. Right now, I am happy with my 24 because I'm recording to the, you know what I'm talking about. S&Q settings we will mess with later, and I don't do proxy recordings. I've been thinking about messing with it though lately. We'll see. Autofocus drive speed. Right now I'm leaving it at normal and standard. Sometimes I mess around with this, but it depends on the camera. The A7 III, I find that the autofocus isn't quite as fast as the A6600 or the A6400. And so I think I actually jack up the autofocus speed on the A7 III a little bit, but I change it depending on the situation. Auto slow shutter, I leave on. This would be to allow it to make the shutter speed slower to get more light in, and then it would get like that choppy kind of look. It doesn't really matter to me because I don't let it control the shutter speed anyway. Audio recording is on. Audio recording level we're gonna get to later. I basically leave all this exactly where it is, except for movie with shutter. I turn on, so when you're in movie mode, if you're on the dial, if you flip it to movie mode and you use the shutter on some of the newer cameras, you can actually initiate recording. On my 6500, that's not an option. You have to use the little record button that's on the side of the handle that everybody hates so much. Silent shooting, as I usually leave it off. I have that in my function menu so I can get to it quickly if I need to. Front curtain shutter, I leave on. Release without lens and release without card, yeah, that's fine. Steady shot, leave that on. Steady shot settings, I just leave as auto. I changed the zoom setting to clear image zoom. I find that it can be helpful sometimes. Display button. So I almost always use the monitor. I just turn off the viewfinder because I just never use it. I find that compositionally, I can move around a lot easier and I can get shots that I couldn't get if I had to have my eye up to the actual viewfinder. So I go in here and I think it defaults to having for viewfinder on, and I just turn that off. Okay, finder monitor is currently disabled because of the way that I'm recording, but I almost always have it set to monitor. If you go into that menu, there's something that says like auto, which will allow you to, when you raise it to your eye, it'll automatically switch over to the electronic viewfinder. But I find that annoying 9 times out of 10, so I just switch it over to the actual monitor, and then I go in and manually switch it to the viewfinder if I want to use that, which is again, almost never. Finder frame rate, I just leave that on standard because again, I rarely use the viewfinder. We'll get into zebras later. I like to have my rule of thirds grid on. I like to have my auto review off. Now we're getting into the fun stuff. Okay, so my custom keys, there are a handful of custom keys on this. There's actually one more than I'm used to with the 6400. If you don't know, these first 3 here, there's different custom keys setups for photos, videos, and playback modes. So that first custom key, this is the one on the back, and it actually says AF/MF on the actual body of the camera. So I leave that as AF/MF, but I change it from control hold to control toggle. So what that means is that I don't have to hold down the button to switch it into autofocus and manual focus to go back and forth between the two. So that's basically like having a switch on your lens. Like some of the higher end lenses have the switch on them from autofocus to manual focus. I basically program a button on my camera to do that. Then if the switch is in the downward position, it currently says AEL auto exposure lock, but I don't use it for that. I use it for auto white balance lock toggle. Now this is a fairly new feature for Sony. What this does is if you're in auto white balance, you can actually lock it away. And this is super handy, especially for videographers, because you don't want your white balance changing throughout a shot. If you point at a different source of light, or if you're in a different area of the room and the white balance seems different to the camera, it'll constantly be shifting. But if you, before every shot, you hit this auto white balance lock toggle, then you're gonna be good to go. And again, I use the toggle rather than the hold, and that allows me to just have to click it and it'll lock. And if I go to my main page here, let me go to auto white balance. And then if I hit that, you can see down in the right-hand corner, there's an auto white balance lock signal. So I know that I'm locked. Then right now I have number 3, which is right beside those two, set to my white balance. This one's actually kind of new to me because that button isn't on my A6400, which is the most comparable body that I have, but I'm excited to try that out. And number 4, which is down in the right-hand corner, is my zebra display select. So that basically turns on and off zebras, which I use a lot to make sure I'm getting proper exposure. Moving to the next page, the center button, focus standard, that's what it comes default as. Number 2, which is the left button on the ring, is drive mode, and I leave that. Number 3 is ISO, and I leave that. Number 4 is exposure compensation, and I leave that as well. On the A7 III, I actually changed the downward button to focus peaking display. The reason being because the A7 III already has a dedicated dial for exposure compensation. And then going to the top of the camera, there are 2 custom buttons. I have that currently set to white balance. Actually, I want to change that. What did I want to set that as again? Oh yeah, zoom. There we go. So now when I hit that button, I'll be able to use the clear image zoom and zoom into, I think it's 1.5 times. Basically, instead of going from a 6K downsample to 4K, I can just zoom into that 4K and we're still getting a full quality 4K file. And number 2 is monitor brightness. I use that when I'm outside and I can't see the monitor very well. I can crank it up and you can see it just fine. Then if you've got a lens with a custom button on it, you can set it here, but I don't own any of those, so it doesn't matter. Now, if we back out and we go into the movie custom keys, so when we're in movie mode, we can have separate custom keys, but right now I just have it following the custom keys of the photo mode. So all of them are exactly the same. I've tested out trying to customize these depending on what setting I'm in, but I just found it more confusing than anything. Then if we go into the playback custom keys, custom button number 3 here, I set to rating. And what that allows me to do is rate my photos right inside of my playback so that when I get it into Lightroom, they're already rated and I know which ones I'm going to use. And then the function button is actually set to send to smartphone. So if I'm in playback mode and I see a photo that I like, I can hit function and it'll pull up all of the things that I need to send it directly to my smartphone. Then the custom buttons on top just follow the other ones. Backing out, okay, function menu setting. So when I hit the function button, this is what I see at the bottom of my screen while I'm shooting. So the top left corner, I use my picture profile. Beside that, I've got focus mode. Beside that, I've got my focus area, which I like to change from wide if I'm just letting the camera do all the work, down to a single spot often. My audio record level, which I need to change quite often when I'm shooting video. Exposure compensation is just like kind of a backup. I know I have it set to the downward button. Then my metering mode, there's my silent shooting, so that's nice and easy to get to if I need to. I've got my shooting mode, so if I want to change into a different mode while I'm in video, that's nice and handy to have there. I've got my face detection and eye detection. I've got my zebra levels here, which I need to change sometimes depending on what picture profile I'm using. They all have different max output levels, so you want to make sure you set that accordingly. Then we've got Gamma Display Assist, which can be super handy again for picture profiles. If you're shooting in something like S-Log2, S-Log3, or HLG, it basically puts like a correction LUT onto your screen so you can see what it's going to look like after it's corrected. Then we've got a Creative Style button, which I don't use a whole lot, but every once in a while, if I need to shoot something that I need to look great straight at a camera, I can kind of tweak it there if I know I don't want to be color correcting it later. And if I actually go to my shooting screen and go to my function menu, I'll show you kind of what I do with some of these. So I'm in picture profile 10 right now, which defaults to the HLG one. I've been kind of playing with different HLG between all the different 4 options here. My last bunch of videos were all shot in HLG 3. This one I'm shooting in HLG 2. Other than that, the only thing that I change is I go to the detail and I dial it down to -7. So that's a picture profile. I sometimes go in and mess with number 1, 2, 3, and 4. If I want to do some weird custom stuff, but I haven't done that so far. I've just been shooting with HLG, and I have that custom button set up to go to manual focus, so I'm not using that. Focus area, so typically I'll either use wide or I like to use this expand flexible spot. Metering mode doesn't change a whole lot, but sometimes I go to a center weighted one. Gamma Display Assist is nice. So you can see it can automatically choose depending on the profile you're in, or you can custom set it. S-Log2, S-Log3, HLG 2020, or HLG 709. Oh, and I guess that's another thing too, is that right now I've changed my HLG to go to 709. This is another thing that I've been playing with. So this isn't like, you should do this. I've been going back and forth and trying out the BT 2020 and the 709 and seeing which one I like better. I find BT 2020, I have to do a lot more work to get it where I want it to go. Whether it's better or not, it's tough to tell at this point, but 709 seems to be easier to work with. Okay, getting on to the dial settings. I don't do anything with that. Dial wheel setup, I just leave it as is. So the wheel on the back is my shutter speed, and the dial that is intended for aperture on the top of the camera is aperture. And then the way that they rotate, I leave as normal. Movie button set to always, so that movie button in the weird place that everyone hates it works. Audio signals, I turn to off, so I don't want it to be beeping when it finds focus, and I don't want it to beep when it starts and stops. Okay, so now we're into the network settings, and I don't change a whole lot of things in here. The send to smartphone function I have mapped to a custom key, so I don't worry about that. Control with smartphone I do use sometimes. Generally I leave it off and then just turn it on when I need it. Apparently airplane mode can save you some battery life, but I don't really worry about that. None of this I touch. And then we're into playback. I don't change any of this stuff, just all default. Display as group is pretty cool. If you're doing a time lapse or burst shooting, you can have them automatically group, and then you can actually have them play back a time lapse in the camera, so I leave that as on. Display rotation I set to off. Yeah, I don't know why. On my A7 III it's set to automatic, and I don't know. I don't know which one I like better yet. This is all stuff that I have other buttons set up for. I just leave that all alone. Display quality defaults to standard. Put it on high, I guess. I don't know. I don't find that it makes that much of a difference. Power save start time, I set to 5 minutes because sometimes when I'm setting up, if I'm setting up lights and all that kind of stuff and it's automatically turning itself off, it gets kind of annoying. Auto power off temperature, I set this to high, and I would suggest that you do the same. That basically is gonna mean that you're not gonna have any issue with overheating. The older Sony cameras had problems with overheating because the camera would shut down as a safety feature before it got to a certain temperature. This basically is saying let it go to a higher temperature before you shut it down. I've never had any issue with overheating on anything above the A6500 because of this function. Touch operation I have on. This I don't really use, so I don't worry about it. I have my IR remote off. HDMI settings I'm not going to touch right now because I'm recording, so they're all set up specifically to that. USB connection set to auto. USB power supply is set to on, so sometimes I actually plug in a USB power supply so that it doesn't run out of battery. Although now with the new batteries in the A6600, I probably won't have to do that as much. My language is set to English, if that surprises you. I do change my file names to done. It defaults to DSC, and then it'll be like 0001, but mine are like Dunna's files because I'm nerdy like that. Folder name, I've been going back and forth on this between standard form and date form. Standard form basically just throws them all into one big folder. Date form actually puts each day worth of photos in a different folder. It doesn't do anything for videos, which is too bad because it would be nice to have my videos sorted by day. But for now, I'm going to stick with standard form on this one. And then we're into the My menu. And this is another customizable function that you have. If you go over to the last page of the My menu setting, you can add an item, sort an item, delete page, delete all that kind of thing. So I've added these specific items that are like, these are all things that I need to get at, but I don't need to get at very often. So for example, my file format for video. So this is again where I can change between 4K and HD. Record settings. So this is where I can go between 24p, 60 frames per second, 120 frames per second, etc. I've got a format button. This actually I do use quite often, so it's nice to have it handy like that. This is where I format my memory card. Control with smartphone. So if I'm going to use that function, it's easy to get at. Interval shooting function, which I don't do a whole lot of, but when I do, it's nice to not have to dig through all the menus for it. And then I've got my memory recall, which we'll get back to in just one second. And then on the second page right now, I've got the S&Q settings. There's probably more that I'll add to this as I find them. But like I said, I only got this camera like yesterday, so I haven't quite got everything in there that I'm sure will, in a month, there'll be 2 pages full of it. I know on the A7 III, I have 2 full pages. Now, when it comes to memory recall, there are 2 spots on the dial here for memory recall. So basically that's a custom setting. So what mode you're in, what your white balance is, what picture profile you're on, all of that kind of stuff. So generally what I'll do is memory recall position 1 will be 24 frames per second, 4K at the highest bit rate that I can go. And it will have daylight white balance. It will have picture profile 10 on some kind of HLG setting lately anyway. It'll have ISO 125 because the HLG, that's the bottom end of the HLG. Shutter speed 1/50th of a second. Autofocus area set to wide. And it remembers all of that in there. And then memory function 2 is almost all the same settings, except it's 60 frames per second, 1080. Shutter speed is 1/125th, and pretty much everything else is the same. Now, the reason that I use 60 instead of 120 is because the autofocus is better in 60 frames per second. And then, like I said, on my menu, page 2, I've got the S&Q settings. I rarely use S&Q, but every once in a while, I want to like quick time lapse, or I want to shoot some slow motion that I can just put on my phone and upload. Yeah, so that's it. That's my whole setup. That's every single menu on how I set up my A6600. I'm the kind of person who changes a lot of this stuff, so I'd be really interested to see if you guys set it up differently on yours, on whatever your camera is. Are there settings that I said that you like differently and why? Leave a comment below. Let me know what your setup looks like, and make sure on your way down there to hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you don't miss any of my future videos. Just a reminder to anyone who has been looking at the Italy trip for next year that we are still running the early bird discount, so now is the best time to put down your deposit. I'll leave a link for that in the description if you want to check it out. It's going to be an amazing trip, and I'm going to try and teach you guys some stuff while we're out there, but it's just going to be an amazing holiday regardless. Thanks so much for going on that little vlogging adventure earlier in the video, and I hope that this was helpful for you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.